speaker that we have for the day is Mr. Dylan Piatti, right? Now, first of all, a little bit about Mr. Piatti. Dylan has actually spoken at several of our conferences, including the Connected Banking Summit, the Africa Digital Banking Summit, Africa Workforce Management Summit. Dylan is the Managing Director, Africa at AGI, Board Director, Futurist Keynote Speaker. Most importantly, he's the chairperson for Ecom Forum Africa as well. Now, this is one leader that has demonstrated a very strategic track record of leadership, growth, and operational excellence across entrepreneurial, mid-enterprise, and global corporate organizations, including in tech, SaaS, consumer products, publishing, retail, and professional services. Dylan is definitely passionate about Industry 4.0, digital transformation. What this means for the clients that Dylan works with is business of today while future-proofing business of tomorrow. Currently leading the African branch of the Advantage Group International, AGI, working with some of the world's largest FMCG and retail brands. Dylan's focus is B2B customer engagement and proprietary digital platform of AGI, AI, and expertise enabled to provide custom and syndicate market research, data analysis, competitive benchmarking, and business advisory services. It gives me great pleasure in welcoming a leader like Dylan Piatti to the forum today. Welcome, Mr. Piatti.
Am I on mute? No, I'm not on mute.
No.
Welcome. Thank you very much. All right, so let's dive straight into this. I think we want to try and keep this to 15 minutes. And I'm looking around the topic of engagement and what that really means in the commercial world that we are working in. So I'm going to take you through a couple of thinking and a few stories that are there, just in terms of context. And I think this really sets the scene for not only the summit, but also this conversation. We are absolutely in the digital age, which means we are always on, and that always on engagement is expected. And this is not just from a consumer perspective, this is also from our B2B perspective. So relationships are in real time. Choice is infinite. I can have access to information and multiple competitive partners across geographies. Delivery is on demand, and that change is constant. And this is all underpinned by technology that is enabling everything we do. So yes, I am passionate about trade and investment in Africa. I'm currently a board director on a Chamber of Commerce, driving inbound investments from Europe into specifically South Africa and the rest of Africa. I was previously chair of the board of the E-commerce Forum Africa, where we are involved with the African Union, as well as the WTO and the UN around driving digital transformation and a digital-led social and economic development for Africa. I've also previously been on the board of an iconic NGO in the arts and education sector. And what's quite important about both that and the experiences I've had with the existing board, the organization with now my time at Deloitte, is that we were always discussing how to improve and further organizations. The one board experience was taking an organization through the financial crisis post-2008. And really the questions we were all asking is, how do we develop better long-term relationships that are sustainable? So how do we keep partners close when basically there is a really tough trading environment? And through these different experiences is this quote that has really stayed with me. It comes from Flight of the Buffalo, written in 1994, fantastic book. It says, change is hard because people overestimate the value of what they have and underestimate the value of what they may gain by giving that up. Going through transformation processes with numerous organizations, that is one of the fundamental challenges that we face, either at a board level, a strategic level, or an operational level. How do we move beyond doing what we've always done? How do we move beyond thinking about just doing what we've done in a different way, slightly better? that is very different. That's called incremental movement. It's not looking at saying, well, hang on, how do we completely reevaluate everything we do? So through that process and these learnings and trying to transform and essentially help this organization survive through some of these crises, the foundation of everything we're looking at was around relationships and this acceptance that business is built on relationships, right? We all say this, but very few of us measure this. I ran a workshop with a multinational pharmaceutical company about a month ago with their sales team, and a new expat director had come in. And in our second part of the module, a very interesting learning, we asked the team to map out what they thought their competitive advantage was. And when we took all their feedback and that they'd done the work they'd done, there were three things that stood out for them as their competitive advantage. One was their people, secondly was their culture, and thirdly was their product. We moved to the second part of the exercise. We say, well, let's map out, in your view, what you believe is a competitive advantage of your competitors. And we took all that information, and we collated it, and we mapped it. We saw that it was people, culture, and product. So we asked them, we said, well, if your competitive advantage is people, culture, products, and so is your competitors, because they're also great multinational companies, what really differentiates you when it comes to your customers and your partners? And it was an interesting realization going through this journey, saying, well, actually, the real differentiation is how we engage. Yes, the people, culture, product, and all the processes and systems underpinning the business are incredibly important in terms of how we're able to show up at our customer. But the difference, that incremental difference, really is how we engage and the extent of those relationships we have. So now we move into this concept of saying, well, okay, how do we really look at engagement? And how do we look at engagement as a competitive advantage? How do we start building engagement ahead of our competitors so that we can create ongoing change that adds value? And this has been something that's really interesting. So this concept of saying, well, how do I move from business of today, which is more transactional? So I'm delivering to you based on my minimal resource requirements, doing just what I have to do to ensure that I'm getting the maximum out of you, versus I'm invested in you, I'm partnering with you, and we're in this for the long term. There's a fundamental shift that's taking place in terms of how we're seeing this engagement paradigm, not only in South Africa, but globally, and we operate in 45 markets. So the question we've been asking then is, can we measure engagement and the health of our business relationships? We believe we can. The question, though, is how do we turn this into a strategic decision-making tool using effective data? And we're going to explore some of this. So what have we done? We've gone and asked the market, and we've been playing primarily in the retailer FMCG space across 45 different markets. And in the last few years, and we've been doing this for 35 years, in the last few years, we went and asked the market. We asked, over just in, for example, globally, 50,000 surveys, 5,000 one-on-one interviews. In South Africa alone, over 1,000 surveys, over 200 one-on-one interviews. And what we're getting from this is a lot of insight into relationship dynamics and how important this is in a commercial environment. So there are three critical things that we're seeing coming out. It's the people, our behaviors, and our capabilities. So the people are foundation of the organization, but the way that we behave, the ways of work, the way we engage, and then obviously our ability to execute. When we dive down into that, we have seen from our results and from the research, there are 6 essential components to this. Firstly, trust, and this is something we're going to focus on. Responsiveness, mutuality. So mutuality talks to we're winning together. It's a win-win relationship versus someone's always losing more than the other is winning. Availability, execution, so the ability to deliver, and then strategy, which is around the strategic alignment. So these are components on their own we could dive into and have a conversation on what this means for your business. But I want to focus on one aspect, and that's the aspect of trust. When we looked at it and we asked, well, what are the key drivers of trust? If we had to really just pick out something, because there are so many different areas that contribute to trust. what came out of research was that's the ease of doing business. So to what extent can we actually do business together? Is it easy, or is it just really difficult to get decisions made? Difficult to do any kind of innovation? Is it difficult to change course at any time? How easy is it to do business with you? How consistent are you? And how accountable are you in terms of what you agree to do and delivering on that? It's a great quote here. When there's trust in the relationship, then it's easy to do business. We are not wasting time trying to manage each other. Trust means that the other party will do what they say, and that's very valuable. So doing what you say you're going to do, and I trust that you're going to do this. I'm confident in providing my resources and investments to you because I know that you're going to deliver, and I'm going to continue to do that into the future. However, we have a lot of skeptics where they look at this, say, well, actually, we are in a commercial relationship with our partners. So are they really going to be making a decision based on trust? Surely it's all about profitability and margin. Well, actually, from the data we've looked at and the competitive benchmarks that we've created over 45 markets, results have shown that trust has a higher significance in terms of the power of relationships and overall performance versus margin. Now, for me, that is a very simple but profound insight. Trust, the health of our relationships, the strength of our relationships have a higher impact on our ability to do business together in the long term than simple commercial viability. Commercial viability can be on a short term, but for the long term, we need that trust parameter. And this is what we've been seeing globally over the last 5 years, just in terms of retailers in the FMCG space. Retailers, their number one priority has been building trust with their suppliers. So from our context, let's have a look at this. Who are the top 7 suppliers in South Africa overall and for trust overall? So 2021, and we're busy in field now. We'll be releasing the 2022 benchmark set in November. In 2021, Coca-Cola were first, followed by Nestle and Mondelez. This is in the overall core benchmark set. So the top 26 suppliers, manufacturing suppliers in South Africa. In terms of trust, number one trusted supplier is PepsiCo, the Simba division, followed by Kellogg's, Clover, Mondelez, and Nestle. Now, what is interesting about this is we've been going through a whole lot of volatility in South Africa. And in fact, our results in South Africa were the highest with the highest variance in our emerging markets and third highest globally. That's against our LATAM, APAC markets. We know the context in South Africa, civil unrest, the challenge with the energy supply. But with this global financial crisis going to hit us really hard at the end of this year, how are we going to survive this? What are we going to be doing? And how does this impact the way that our supplier retailer relationships move forward? Trust is critical to this. So let's have a look. Who are the top retailers? 2021. Spar is number one, followed by Save Hyper, Shoprite Checkers, and then we've got this small regional player in Manhattan. You see Woolworths coming through just 7th. When we look at trust factor, interesting here to see from a supply perspective, Spar coming out also as the most trusted retailer in South Africa 2021, followed by Woolworths, Save Hyper, Manhattan from a localized perspective, and OK Franchise division. So what are we learning about B2B relationships in this context? Firstly, we can measure engagement health. Instead of saying businesses are built on relationships and having this anecdotal feedback mechanism, we can provide a structured, data-driven mechanism to measure the health of our relationships. And it's something that is increasing and accelerating globally. We are seeing this as a key stakeholder management process, whether you are a supplier or you're a buyer in terms of services or products. How do you manage that more effectively? The trust imperative is absolutely critical to this. If anyone follows Simon Sinek, I'm a huge fan of him. He talks about trust, and trust in relationships is not just one thing. It's not just one thing that has happened to say that now we trust you. It is built over time, over a number of different things that add up to having the sensation. But how do we really measure that? How do we measure that experience? How do we compete for additional resource? How do we ensure that we are getting incremental opportunity based on our relationship? So what we're testing essentially is if there are three, let's call it three suppliers in a room, and there's one customer. When that customer has an opportunity for innovation or discretionary spend, who are they going to pick the phone up and call? That is what we're competing for. That is what's going to give you the competitive advantage in the future. Equally, from a customer perspective and their suppliers, when those suppliers are going to dedicate additional resources or want to do some kind of collaboration for the future, who are they going to pick up the phone to? It was an eye-opener to have one of the largest companies in the world say to us that their product is far better suited to customer X. However, they invest more and have far better listings and revenue from customer Y, simply because of the extent of their relationship with that customer and how they're able to work together and collaborate. The other learning that we're seeing as we roll out what we're doing globally is that engagement is sector agnostic. We are now doing projects across telco. We should be moving into distribution space, and we're going to move into financial services. We've been doing some custom projects from multi-markets around sustainability engagement, looking at exports. It is certainly sector agnostic, but we're seeing the same trends in terms of giving it the same kind of attention and specific metric in the way we measure it. So just to end, I wanted to tell you about one experience I had, which was, I was very privileged to be invited to present at the World Investment Forum in Geneva a few years ago. And we got to meet Sophia there, the world's most advanced humanoid. Sophia was being interviewed. And it's just a live interview. We're sitting in the auditorium, and she is taking in the information and learning while she's being interviewed and learning from the questions and that from the audience. And the moderator asked her, Sophia, if there's one thing you could learn to do, what would it be? And we were all expecting that she could find a way to solve world hunger, create world peace, those big issues that are prevalent. But this was Sophia's response. There's one thing I could learn to do. I would love to learn to dance. So here we have Sophia, the world's most sophisticated artificial intelligence humanoid. And the one thing she really wants to do is connect with the essence of what it is to be human. What did we take away from that? And in the context of what we're talking about in engagement in this digital world, accelerating transactions and engagement, always on, what do we take away from that? So this is our learning. The more digital we become, the more we need the human connection. When we look to drive commercial returns, sustainable commercial returns through partnerships, we need to look at how we engage. We need to invest in really understanding the power of engagement and how this translates into creating competitive advantage for the future. Thank you very much. And that is my presentation to you today. And I hope that you take away some of this and look at how you can implement it in the business spheres that you are working in.
Wow, Dylan, I am quite inspired. I was listening throughout, and yeah, it's quite remarkable. And we've always thought about what drives profits to be, the usual, metrics of, as you say, profit margins, the typical metrics. But people, culture, and products. Is it so? This is my first question. Is it in that hierarchy, people, culture, product, or is it kind of like a circle of looking at it as more of a circulation, a flow, as opposed to hierarchy?
Yeah, I wouldn't call it a hierarchy. It really depends on the business. More often than not, and what I found working with, so many of these, privileged to work with so many of these multinationals. Everyone's trying, more often than not, they're trying to serve the same customer, but they've got completely different operations, operating structures, capabilities and resources, and different people and culture there, but they're all trying to serve the same customer. So essentially compete in the same market. So they're all aspects of creating competitive advantage. And what we are looking at is saying, yes, we've got to look at those aspects. But when we put a customer-centric view or partner-centric view on it, what does it mean in terms of the way we think about how these are geared to enhance our relationships and partnerships for the future? And that might mean, so we've had one company where one of the learnings we realized was that they were really struggling because they had had a culture change, that had a leadership change, and the transition was taking time. There had been created a whole lot of uncertainty in the business. We'd seen a whole, quite a bit of attrition in the middle management. So suddenly junior management were being accelerated into middle management. They had the capabilities as highly skilled individuals, but didn't have the experience and the authority to then engage effectively. So the relationship dynamics started dropping. What meant is that customers stopped giving them the same amount of attention and time that they did previously. And as a result, the opportunities started declining. Their forward share started declining and their revenue started declining. I mean, it's a really micro example of where you can start diving into how these all impact. So they're absolutely all interconnected. There isn't this one before the other, but it's about understanding how they all fit together and taking a different view of how we can also create competitive advantage through specifically focusing on customer centricity in a B2B environment.
Let's just unpack this really strong word, trust, right? I mean, it's quite a strong word, and I really want to unpack it, or at least for someone who's looking, say for instance, you're looking to build something that relies on online payment, right? And that's always been kind of like the challenge of anything that requires you to give your financial information to a digital solution of that could be operating anywhere, right? So what advice could you give to anyone who's building something that requires a client to make an online payment without the client having to know much about that company? What could you advise them?
I mean, we've been trying to work with trust. I think it was 8 years ago, we actually proposed the first digital trust mark for Africa in order to really try and move that exact challenge kind of forward. Yes, you need to have trusted systems, and there's different accreditation processes you need to go through to have that. The trust, though, is also built on how you service that customer. So the reality is things go wrong. It's normal for things to not always work perfectly. You want to decrease the incidence of errors, but the important part is what do you do when something goes wrong? How do you take, we talked about earlier, accountability in that. How accountable are you for those errors? How responsive are you to those errors? And how willing are you to actually go in and fix it? And I think that all talks to the message that you get to the customer. So if something goes wrong and you own up straight away, you recognize it and you create a solution to solve it, and you basically help me out, I'm going to go, okay, this person is willing, or this company is now willing to go the extra mile. I'm important to them. If something is an error and I feed back and say, well, sorry, we'll get back to you later. Oh, we're not sure if it's us. It could have been one of the other technical departments. Then I go, okay, essentially then you don't really care. You've really got my business. I'm probably not going to invest with you in the future, and I'm certainly not going to recommend you. Now, these are very granular micro examples, but they add up to making a big difference.
Absolutely. I mean, that's what most companies do, or at least startups don't do, that level of accountability that, should my money go missing or should something go wrong, who do I speak to? Is it an email that I can forward? Is it a call that I can make? And I think, physical or brick or mortar businesses still have that strong leverage over, digital businesses. Just having that sense of accountability. I can walk to a branch and, have someone just sit down and explain to me what just happened.
That's not true at all. That's not true at all. the digital engagement sphere is advanced. I mean, I spoke at a customer experience conference.
So
I think
do we have
weeks
an
ago.
accountability system in check? That's what I'm asking. Does the digital community give the customer enough confidence to say, listen, I can put whatever amount with you, or whatever product or service that you're selling, and I shouldn't have to worry about should anything go wrong? I mean, that's what we're trying to unpack. But let me get to my second question. Culture. Most businesses face what we call legacy culture. Brett King unpacks it in his book called Bank 4.0, and he always analyzes it in respect to the banking services. He says most traditional businesses have this, this is how we do things here. And I have 40 years experience, in this business, and I've been doing this, for however long. How do you allow the new role players, these new IT specialists coming in and saying, listen, we need to build technologies, we need to build softwares that help us to communicate better with customers, but also you have that the guy who's how do you help companies to evolve in their organizational culture, so that they can get the right culture that's vibrant and forward looking?
Yeah, so look, this is a normal, you'll have this wherever you are. It's about translating opportunity into value, and value is in the eye of the beholder. So value for me and value for you might be different depending on where I sit in the business. So it's important that I translate it into your context, because I'm trying to get your buy. And this is often what we've seen. I've seen this working with some tech guys. They can see how fantastic this product is, but they cannot translate that value into the overall business context so that the leadership can effectively buy into it. That is the gap. That's a communication gap. I mean, that's also an engagement relationship dynamic in terms of onboarding players. And this is normal in any environment. So I think, before I got involved with Deloitte, I was in startups. And I always say that I wish I had all the learnings from big corporate in terms of stakeholder engagement when I was in startups, because that's actually a fundamental difference. We can marry those two, keep the entrepreneurial spirit, but understand that you need to look at stakeholder engagement as a critical strategic priority. Then you're going to see accelerated success.
Just one more on what we spoke about. Okay, lastly, on people. I mean, people are very difficult to manage. I think one of my friends, he said, if you're looking for loyalty, get a dog. People always, especially graduates, are always moving from one company to another, looking for higher salaries in etc. How do you not just manage, but how do you keep people in in the organization and make sure that they're happy, they feel there's opportunities of growth, and they are well appreciated in the environment in which they're working, especially in of course in the digital era that we're in?
Yeah, look, I work for a company where we have hybrid way of work, and to be honest, my teams are all virtual, and it is a struggle, but there are ways that you can do it. So one is about creating a sense of purpose and a sense of value and connectivity. In fact, I was part of a company recently. They're looking at a global study around hybrid ways of work and people management, human capital, how you effectively manage it. Now, we've also got to segment it. Okay, so we've got to look at the different aspects of the business. How we manage your senior resources to your mid-management to your junior resources is going to be very different and very nuanced. So they have different needs. So you've got to segment it. It's not a one size fits all. But if I take a company that I've just worked with, I've seen this transition they've gone in 3 years from a new leader. They are still selling the exact same product. There's no difference in the product, but the entire culture has completely evolved to far more engaged, integrated. People have a voice. And this was actually led by this leader. And we were working with them in terms of looking at engagement. But the one big thing that stood out for us is allowing individuals to have a voice and providing platforms for them to have a voice, be heard, and to get feedback, so that they are contributing to the change of that organization. They're not being told, we've decided at the top, therefore you must go and do. We are inviting you to participate in this, and we will then take that feedback, play it back to you, and now we've made a decision as a result. And it's a hard thing to do because it requires time and attention. And more often than not, as a leader, you're trying to keep the lights on, and it's very difficult to go provide time and attention to this. But it's a huge risk if you don't.
Yeah, understood. All right, Mr. Dillon, thank you very much for your engagement. Unfortunately, we do have to let you leave. But yeah, we got the gist. Give the people their voice. There is profit, in looking at people, culture, and of course, product. Thank you very much. Hopefully, get to see you at our